In today's video, we're going to take a look at a clip of an interview from conservative evangelical YouTuber Alan Parr, where he's interviewing fundamentalist apologist Frank Turek. And in this clip, he's going to ask Frank Turek about biblical violence. And then we're going to consider the first of Frank Turek's replies, and I will then offer a critical response to that reply.
Another question that has been thrown out a few times. How can God claim to be moral when he kills innocent people in the Old Testament? I mean, God tells us do not murder, and he murders. God tells us to be morally upstanding individuals and judges us whenever we do it. But then we look in the Old Testament and, he's killing entire nations, and he's telling the nation of Israel to go in and kill babies and pregnant women and, seemingly, innocent people. And then even if the nation as a whole was guilty, can we really say that every single person in that, I mean, like, babies haven't done anything wrong. I mean, every single person in that nation is evil and deserves to die, just because maybe there were some evil people that did some things. And so, I mean, it seemed like God is kind of contradicting himself.
Yeah, great question. And again, when an atheist asks me this question on a college campus, the question I'm always going to ask back is, by what standard are you judging God to be wrong? Because again, if there's no God, it's just your personal opinion. You might not like what goes on in the Old Testament, but it's not objective. It's just in you, the subject. Unless there's a standard beyond us, everything's just a matter of opinion. But secondly, I would ask the question,
The first thing I want to point out is Turek, he assumes for some reason that the person who's posing the question is an atheist. He frames the question in terms of atheism. Why? I mean, on what basis? The person might just be a skeptic, a doubter, might have no particular metaphysical beliefs at all, or they might be a Christian who's wrestling with that very question. For some reason, he presents it as being in the mouth of an atheist. Perhaps one reason he does that is because then it allows him to offer a counterpoint of deflection by targeting that person and their belief. He tries to turn it around on them and say, well, essentially, you don't even have a right to ask the question because, on my view, you don't have an adequate basis to ground the objective moral values and obligations in terms of your atheistic worldview. So that already is a tendentious framing because he's assuming the question comes from an atheist, first of all. And second, he's engaging in a red herring by critiquing the atheist and their right even to ask the question. And that is spurious because the atheist here, assuming it is an atheist, again, who knows who this person is, but assuming it even is an atheist, the question isn't about their morality. The question is about Frank Turek's morality. The question is not whether they have a metaphysical ground to affirm objective moral values and obligations. The question is, how does Turek reconcile his commitment to the morality of Jesus, to love thy neighbor as themselves, um, to treat your neighbors, treat others as you would want to be treated, to show love and compassion for others. How do you reconcile your professed Christian morality and, I mean, admittedly, general moral intuitions that you believe are grounded in a theistic metaphysic? How do you reconcile that with God commanding and commending the slaughter of women, children, infants, non-combatants, etc., in the Old Testament? So that's not a question that an atheist has to answer. They don't have to explain their own account of the objective metaphysics of morals in order to present an internal apparent contradiction to the Christian. So it's a red herring. Now, the last thing I want to say about this is, there's this old saying, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. When your first response to the atheist, again, assuming it is an atheist who asks that question, when your first assumption is to respond by saying, essentially, you don't even have a right to ask the question because I believe your account of the objective metaphysics of morality is inadequate, what you end up simply doing is alienating the very person that you profess to want to reach as an apologist, because you're not engaging in good faith, I would say, with an open hand to try to understand and steelman their objection by understanding it is presented as an internal critique to your specific views. Rather, you are attempting, I would say, in bad faith, turn it back on them and by make it now a question about their own morality rather than yours. And because that is your first response, you end up alienating that person and poisoning the well at the outset, so that even if you have something valid to say after that, it's much less likely that they're going to be open to hearing what you have to say because you've already alienated them by trying to turn around the question fallaciously and to make it a question about their own metaphysical account of morality.